Okay, so hopefully you had a chance to look at that poem and say what you could about it using those little read and perceive prompts. We're going to do that again later on throughout this unit, and you'll have a lot more to say about some other poems, I'm sure. So that was just an introduction to some of what we'll be doing with poetry. I want to turn back to the epilogue to A Step from Heaven. I know most of you have given me your books. If you haven't, just leave them on my desk and I'll collect them when I get back and turn them in. But we didn't get a chance to talk too much about the epilogue, the very end of this book, which was a little chapter all about Umma's hands. We had things in that chapter like Umma's hands are as old as sand. You might have noticed that was a type of figurative language. Amma said her hands were her life, but for us, she only wished to see our hands holding books. You must use this, she said, and pointed to her mind. Umma's hands worked hard to make sure our hands would not resemble hers. And this quote here: the old scar, white and fleshy, still remembers the hard kiss of the dancing knife. So there's some real interesting quotes here, some real interesting figurative language going on in some of them. And we're going to use that to think about our own poem. And this is a assignment that we've done for a number of years called the hand poem assignment. You hopefully grabbed it already. It's this pink sheet here. And I'm just going to read through what your expectations for this are. Again, we're kind of inspired by what we read in A Step from Heaven, by this epilogue, all about Umma's hands. And you're going to write about the hands of one of your family members. It has to be a human person, no pets. In your poem, you're going to show what the hands do, kind of like you might have seen in some of those quotes I just gave you. This is going to tell the reader, whoever's reading your poem, about the owner, about the people who have these hands. You're going to include imagery, figurative language, to express your thoughts in a unique way. So thinking about similes, metaphors, and some other things we haven't really talked about yet, like personification and onomatopoeia and things like that. You're going to try to do the best you can to express who this person is through their hands. You should appeal to the senses of sight, smell, touch, and feel. We've talked about sensory details this year. This is going to be a huge assignment to use sensory details in, to really get across what these people's hands are like. Be sure to show your relationship to this person through the descriptions that you include in your poem. And like poems tend to do, I want you to explore the space on your page. How can you place each line of poetry to create the biggest impact on your reader? How can you choose what's the first word of a line and what's the last word of a line? Is there rhyme? Is there not rhyme in a poem? Choose each word carefully to ensure the biggest impact to make it the best poem that you know how to make it. Now, this isn't due for a while. It's due on the due dates you see on the sheet. But I want you to consider the following. Think about what the title is going to be for this poem. Something creative that's not just hands or hand poem. Think about the presentation. Again, it should be visually appealing. Think about the space on the page. Should be neat. And when it's final draft, it should look like a final draft. Should be clear that you thought about where to begin and end each line. You thought about the rhythm of the poem. And it shouldn't just look like a paragraph. It should look like a poem. Again, there's a few other things to think about here. We can talk more about that when I get back. And you're probably not ready to write your poem just yet because this is day one of our poetry unit. So we're going to have some time later in class to just go on the back of this pink sheet and start doing some brainstorming to think about who am I going to write about, what's their relationship to me, and how can I best describe their hands? What sorts of things might I see, hear, smell, taste, things like that. This will be a good way to brainstorm to make sure that you have some stuff for a good poem as we go forward in our poetry unit and learn more of these terms and think more about what poetry is and how you can become the best poet you can be. So that'll be something you'll work on at the end of our time together. You should have also grabbed this white sheet which says poetry pre-assessment on it. And you'll want to put your name on this. Make sure you put your period as well. And you're just going to define for me, if you can, in the best way you know how, what each of these terms is. Now, this is not anything that's graded. It's not going on Schoology or anything like that. I'm going to take a look at it and just really see what you know. On day one of our poetry unit, where are you? Do you know all these terms? If you do, great. I'll see that on your sheet. Maybe you only know a couple of them, like the ones we've already talked about in class. That's fine too. I just want to see where you're at, what you know, and that'll help me to be the best teacher I can be for you in this next few weeks with our poetry unit. So you want to complete this first. When you're done, you can hand it into the sub, and then you'll have time to look at this hand poem assignment again and start working on the brainstorming piece of it. All right, let's get started.